All right, are we ready?
I am, yes. Like Mark's trying to get his headphones connected. With that, I'll get us started before we wait for Mark. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Planning Advisory Committee for Tuesday, December 13th for the town of Quispamsis. In saying that, you'll notice some differences tonight. We have, I'm the chairman. I'm at home. I'm kind of under the weather a bit, so I thought it was the best idea to stay home. Mr. Bishop, who's the vice chair, is sitting in the chair position to operate the dashboard, but in turn, I'm still going to be acting chair
I
as,
can hear you now, Darren. Can you hear me?
yeah,
Oh, okay, great.
as the case goes that Darren would like to speak on a few items, and as chair, you generally have to step down. In that case, there wouldn't be any vice chair. So with that, we're going to proceed on to the meeting. And for that, I'd like to have you approve. Can I call for approval of the agenda, please?
So moved.
Thanks, Kendall. Can I have a seconder on that?
I'll second that.
Thanks, that Brent. Thank you. Can we have a vote on that, please, Violet? That motion's carried by a vote of 6-0. Move on to the next item in the agenda, which is disclosures of interest. Is there any disclosures of interest? None being, we'll move on to the approval of previous minutes. Is there any amendments to the previous minutes? None being, can we have a motion to approve, please?
Brenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Brenda. Can I have a seconder on that?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Darren. Can we have a vote, please, on the approval of the previous minutes? Motion carried unanimously. With that, we'll move on to item 5, business arising from previous minutes. Can I have a motion to receive and file, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder on that?
I'll second it. It's
Thanks,
Kendall.
Kendall, thank you. Can we have a vote on that, please? Thank you. A motion carried unanimously. That being, we'll move on to item 6, unfinished business, Sylvan Holdings. That's still on hold by the client. That being, we'll move on to item 7, new business. Item 7A, 22 Colonial Drive. That item has been postponed until the January 10th meeting of 2023. Now we'll move on to item, sorry. Everyone okay with that? With that being, we'll move on to item 7B, 157 Palmer Brook Road. Would the applicant please come up to the podium and state their name? In the meantime, Dwight, could you introduce that item, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For way of clarification and to PAC members, subsequent to the posting of the agenda, we received word from the applicant that they wish to defer their application until a future meeting. There were items in the staff report that they would like have time to address prior to coming to the Planning Advisory Committee regarding the development. So at this time, it would be in order, if PAC desires to do so, would be to make a motion to defer the item. At this stage, I would anticipate to the January 10th meeting. So that particular item has been requested to be deferred. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dwight. Can I have a motion to defer that to the January 10th meeting, please?
Mr. Chairman, I'll put a motion forward to defer this item to January 10th.
Thank you, Kendall. Can we have a seconder on that?
I'll second that.
All right. Can we have a vote on that, please? I'm not sure we need to do that, but I think we'll do it anyway, just to be sure.
Mr. Goslin, we haven't got your vote on that.
There it goes.
Motion carried unanimously. Thank you, Darren. With that, we'll move on to 80 Millennium Drive. Could the applicant please come up the podium, state your name for the record, and in the meantime, Jennifer, can you want to introduce this item for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the applicants are applying to have a doggy daycare and retail business at 80 Millennium Drive, and they're here before you as it is a discretionary use, similar to a discretionary use, and that discretionary use is a kennel. So the zoning bylaw does permit that in section 3D1, and the applicants are asking that that PAC consider this as similar to a permitted discretionary use, which is a kennel. It is for the location. The lot is found in the business park commercial zone. It has 30,601 square meters. There are currently 3 buildings located on the lot of similar shape and size. And we do currently have an application for a 4th building, and in speaking with the developer, there are plans for even an additional building. So the lot is still sort of being developed. The proposal is for the doggy daycare and retail store. The doggy daycare would have an outdoor area that is 72 square meters. It would be located between 2 buildings. I'm just wondering, Chrissy, if you could scroll down just a little bit so I could look out the other. Yep. So you can see the configuration of the 3 blue roofs. So the one closest to the road, we'll call number 80. The one next to that, I've called number 84 in my staff report. And the third one that really isn't discussed is further down. So the doggy kennel for outdoors is to be located between these 2 buildings and will be 72 square meters. The area will be supervised when dogs are out there, I was told by the applicants, and a fence permit will be required for the installation of the fence. The applicants have also indicated that there will be a maximum of 25 dogs permitted. Inside of the building, it's laid out basically into 2 separate rooms. One is 87.3 square meters, which is 940 square feet, and that is dedicated for the dog daycare. The other room is 99.1 square meters, or 67 square feet, and that is dedicated to the retail space. The lot is zoned as business park commercial, and it does abut onto a residential zone. There is an existing development agreement with 80 Millennium, and in that development agreement, it does state that there's a requirement of a 15-meter buffer, and it's shown there on the screen. We looked at that, the overlay of the 15-meter buffer, and it's met or exceeded. So the developer has lived up to that expectation. So I did a little measurement from the location of the outdoor dog care to the backyards of the residential properties is 135 meters. I'm just giving you all this information to help you with your decision making, of course. And then there's the 50-meter buffers included in that. And I did the contour lines, and I found that the backyards are actually 5 meters above from where the dog pens will be located, just to help everyone. The applicants have indicated some soundproofing has been included on the interior of the building. Committee may wish to investigate with that, a little more detail about that if they wish. There are provisions in our zoning bylaw number 38 that provide provisions for kennels. I reviewed them. The bylaw that we are using refers to a kennel license that no longer exists in New Brunswick. That has been replaced by a pet establishment license. So those are only qualify for a pet establishment license if you're breeding dogs or keeping them overnight, or if you are a shelter where you're taking dogs in. And so they wouldn't qualify for under that. So a kennel license, which is being asked for in our bylaw, it's no longer available. So our bylaws are old. We'll have to get caught up to current day regulation. But number 4 does say that the breeding and keeping or breeding of 5 or more dogs is only permitted in a commercial or light industrial zone, and this is a commercial zone. I already just talked about that. So concerns, we have received several concerns from the neighboring properties. They are not in favor of the dog daycare, and the concerns were surrounding noise from dogs, the dog barking, and this would cause a reduction in the quality of life. So all of the letters that we received are in the package that you have received along with the staff report, and that's.
Thank you, Jennifer. Could the applicants state their name for the record, please?
Yes, Tim Holmes.
Julie Holmes?
Thank you, Tim and Julie. You guys would have received the same package we did in the mail. Is there anything you'd like to add or discuss prior to any comments coming from or questions from PAC or the public?
Yeah, I'd like to just add a little bit more to the package, if I may. First of all, thank you, PAC members and staff, for allowing us to come today and present our case. So just in addition, I just want to speak to the quality of what we're looking to bring with the doggy daycare. We're looking at a premium service. It's more, we're calling it a resort, so a resort for the dogs. Part of that process is the dog instructor, if you will, that we have on team. He's a certified pet nutritionist. He's certified dog behaviorist and also aggression. Part of that process of the dogs coming into a resort, they have to go through an assessment. And part of that assessment is assessing their dog behavior. If it's an aggressive type of dog of that nature, then they will not be welcome into the resort, for sure. And then number 2 on that piece as well is there'll be activities throughout the day. So it's more like, if you will, a daycare for children, but for dogs. So there's agility training, there's going to be, behavioral training that he can deliver, and there'll be time spent, yes, outside, but also time spent inside. And as well, there'll be live streaming video. So people can go and take a look at their dogs at any time during the day while we have the dogs, so they can dial in and see. And hopefully in the future, what we want to be able to do is also record those images as well. And something should happen to their pet in the future, they could have that as a keepsake. So we're looking to do that as well as with the pet store itself. That's going to be at the front of the building. We're looking to bring in premium products for the pets when it comes to food and toys and that type of nature. So we've done a lot of research to try to make sure that we bring in all Canadian products and the best that we can as far as what's available in the market today. So we're bringing multiple business to the economy here in Quispamsis. We're both from the St. John and surrounding area. Previously, we lived in Edmonton for 12 years, but we just recently moved home after losing 2 children, adult children. And part of our purpose is to come back and get back to this community. And by doing that, this is the business that we'd like to launch and bring employment and bring love and inspire people in this community that we're from.
And with the assessments as well, we do have the clients come in, we assess their dog. We want to bring them into the kennel to see if they interact well with other dogs. If they don't pass the assessment, unfortunately, they can't join the daycare. The dogs do have to be altered. They do have to be fully vaccinated, and they do have to be tagged.
Thank you for all those additional comments and updates. That's great. Do any members of PAC have any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it's Brent. I have several questions for the applicants. One with regards to the training cycle with the dogs. How much time is going to be inside? How much time is going to be outside in a typical 8-hour day?
Probably a couple of hours. I won't be all at the same time, but it'll be split up to make sure that they do get outside air, which is obviously important for their health. But majority of the time we'll be spent doing the agility and course, weather permitting, but we're looking at a couple hours per day for them to be outside in the outside fenced-in area, if you will, and only in the fenced-in area.
Okay, speaking of the fenced-in area, I know in the report it says a chain link fence. Are you opposed to modifying that?
I'm not, or we're not, and also with the chain link fence, we were discussing one of the things that we had out west with the chain link fence is we put privacy slats in the chain link fence to keep the blocking because we obviously want our own dogs. So we were looking at that wasn't part, but great question. But we were looking to enhance it that way. But if we wanted to alter it a different way, then I'm totally open, and I'm sure my wife is too.
I guess what I'm thinking of is potentially a privacy fence across the back of the property that parallels to where the residents are. So basically, that would be one, and then the rest of it could be chain link. It would actually should act as a sound barrier for you.
Right. Yeah. And if I may, could I ask Mr. Hatfield to help with some of the questions here? Is that something that we could do with the fencing, or? Certainly is. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess the last question from the staff report is what's been done inside for soundproofing?
Ian, Mark?
Yeah, currently there's approximately 6 Vauxhall.
Excuse me?
Could you step up to the
Yeah,
podium?
Yeah.
nobody can hear outside.
Please state your name. Mark
Can you state your name? State your name, please, Mark.
Yep, Mark Hatfield. Good evening, PAC members and staff. On the inside of the current building now, there are rock salt panels built approximately 2 feet by approximately 8 feet wide that dents the sound. So when you walk into one room, currently everything echoes just because it's a large area. With these panels on the wall in a test phase, it basically takes away all the echoing completely. So those panels are up, split between the 2 rooms, and it keeps any echoing down just because they are large rooms.
Okay, thank you.
And on that fence, through you, Chairman, to Brent, yes, definitely could do some privacy slats on the back wall and down the side, so there'd be no. It would definitely act as a sound barrier and direct any barking towards the front.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mark.
Any other questions from members of PAC?
Just a quick question. I don't have a dog, but I would assume if it's outdoors in that area, it would want some shade. Right now, it's cool enough, but in July and August, there's no shade. To me, that's a problem, and a lot of people would not want their dogs out in that situation. You can tell me
Yeah, it'd be very easy to put a canopy on the top, wouldn't it, Mark? Just to shade it out, because we did think about that as well.
So you're going to enclose that outdoor space?
It'd be like a type of
An
canopy
awning type
that's
of thing.
an awning or something that's going to cover them, give them the shade.
But it'll still be gravel?
Pardon me?
There'll still be gravel? That's gravel
Yep.
and then pavement?
Yes.
And that's not going to change?
No, it's gravel where the pin is.
All right, that was my question, and I have to question for Dwight or Jennifer. I'm trying to figure out how this is a similar, right, to that.
Similar use.
To me, there's nothing like that on the Millennium Drive. Yes, retail, but not a dog daycare. And so it's up to PAC if they make the decision, because that would be discretionary, right? So it's not similar. So it'd have to be just as decision of PAC. I'll be right up front, as I have sometimes done. I went up to Grannon and stopped in the houses in the front of them, and I was not in their backyard, but you can hear stuff. So if you have more, I hear a dog barking in the distance, but if you had potentially 25 dogs barking, that would be horrendous. You want your windows open and things like that. I have a problem with this. Not the retail aspect, but the daycare type of thing. To me, I know, and Jennifer said the houses are there 5 meters higher. That takes away from the buffer. If that was flat and the trees, but they're on the hill up above the development, the sound goes up. So I have a problem with this, and right now I don't think I can be convinced that it's something that I would like to have in my backyard, because I do try to make my decisions based on what I would not mind in my backyard. And right now, this is not working for me. So, up front.
That's fair.
Thank you, Brenda.
And thank
Is
you.
there-
And through you, Mr. Chair, if I might, so it's similar to a permitted use, and the permitted use is a kennel. The kennel is a discretionary use in the business park or in a commercial zone or a light industrial zone. So the decision is making a decision on similar compatible to a discretionary use that is permitted, that is a permitted use in that zone.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
to the applicants, what would happen if, I know you're doing some checking on the behavior of the dogs prior to accepting them, but what happened if for whatever the reason, the owner of the dog cannot pick up the dog after, let's say, 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever the times are? What do you do from there?
That's a good question. I mean, we would have to stay late and keep the dog inside where the noise barrier is until the client can come pick up the dog. We don't suspect that's going to happen quite often, but there'll be times that'll be one dog left behind, I'm sure, during busy times. But
So, and the dog will stay overnight?
no. Was your
Okay,
question?
if the owner if the owner, for whatever the reason, I'm just trying extreme here perhaps, but if the owner for whatever the reason cannot pick up the dog because he's busy somewhere else, or he got tied up or whatever happened, so what happened to the dog after 6 o'clock? I know you can wait until 7 or 8, but you're not going to keep a staff all night, are you?
No, we
Not
wouldn't.
at that location. No, our current dog trainer, he has availability, and we've discussed this, and he can either have the dog go to his house or the dog can be at our house. And from other research that we've done, the standard has been up to 5 days for other dog daycares, if you will, within Canada. If the dog is not picked up within the 5 days, it's called abandoned, and the doggy daycare becomes ownership of it. And a lot of the daycares then move it on to like the SPCA and be refostered back out has been the standard that we've seen so far.
So the dog will not be staying overnight, period.
No.
Period. No, absolutely not.
Okay, and I know you mentioned earlier that you assess the dog and the quality of the good things. What happened if the dog keeps barking and barking and barking because it's not used to be with other dogs, or he's not used to be by himself, or whatever the reason, and the neighbors are complaining? So what do we do in that instance?
Well, in those instances, like there's going to be a level, like I say, that our trainer has. I'm not certified he is, but I do understand from his perspective that if they pass the assessment as, like you say, that they're supposed to be a good dog, if you will, and the obedience training is there. If they could be agitated, it could be something to do with a vet may need to look at the dog. There could be a serious medical issue. So we do have a lineup with a vet as well, that we can have the vet look at the dog. Number one, the owner will be contacted about the situation and what's been going on, and if we have to remove the dog from the presence, when if it's because it's a medical issue, then we'll deal with that with the vet. And if it's not a medical issue and it's just a obedience behavior, I really feel confident in our trainer that he'll be able to correct that. However, if he couldn't, then we'll have to meet up with the owner and obviously let the owner know this is the situation, and most likely won't be allowed back into the resort until further obedience training is taken.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for the applicant from PAC members?
Mr. Chairman, it's Brent. Just one last question for the applicants. So I know you're gonna have, the dog's gonna spend part of the time outside, part of the time inside. So when you're doing your training outside, is it gonna be all 20, maximum 25, or is it gonna be small packs of dogs, like 3 or 4, cycling through the day, or?
Yeah, that's the plan, is to do a cycle for sure. That's resting, yes, it's to cycle them through. Depending on the activities, there's some activities that we looking to have planned with our dog trainer that would be, you know, more so upwards of the 25 when those activities outside and it's a nice day and it's cool for them to do so. But most likely right now what we're planning is the majority of the time it would be a cycle through. And there's also dividers within the building that the dogs will be also within divided, depending on, like, some dogs will have a sleep period, some dogs will have a play period. There are different stages of their adult life, if you will. Some are more of a puppy stage, so there's also broken up activities that way too.
Thank you. Any further comments for the applicant from members of PAC? None being, is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? Is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak? Oh, yep. Could you please come up to the podium and state your name for the record, please? Can the applicants please be seated?
Good evening, Jim Maber, 10 Granite Drive. I'm here on behalf of my wife, Catherine, and some other members in the community. I'm in opposition of the daycare. Just to make it clear that we don't oppose a retail applicant. We're more concerned with the volume of dogs, the potential of 25 being there, whether they're housed inside or outside. We've already submitted our concern through a letter with some names. We know we deal with the light industrial area behind our property. We knew that when we bought our properties, it will be eventually developed. For the most part, I can say that things have been pretty good. You do get the odd backup beeper from Home Hardware or Big Rock and the pressure washers, but we've come to live with that. Last summer, we did get involved with an issue with some topsoil screening, the constant hum of the drum going through. We dealt with that with Mark and we came to a resolution. So for the most part, things have been good there. Yes, certainly. Understood. Thank you. So like I said, for the most part, things have been pretty good. Our concerns are with the volumes of the dogs, the number of dogs, the combination being inside and outside, the echoing. In the report, they talk about a treed buffer. There is in fact a treed buffer along most of the property line. However, the town did go in a couple years ago for the easement for a water line and did cut out a pretty big swath of trees that was only rectified with a bit of a berm and a couple small plants that Mark looked after for us a year ago. So there is a kind of a swath that goes up there, and when you're sitting up higher up, sound comes through. So like I said, we're in opposition. We're concerned that Saturday as well. It's not just during the day when maybe people are sleeping, shift workers, trying to enjoy your property after supper, but also on Saturday. That's a big thing as well. I know that there's animal control bylaws. I know that if my neighbor's dog was barking incessantly next to me, I could call the bylaw officer and they'd come down and see what's going on with the dog, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess the concern is that you're trying to compare it to a kennel use, and for a light industrial, maybe you might have 5 or more dogs, but 25 versus a maximum of so many per residential area doesn't really jive with that comparison as far as I'm concerned. So I'll just leave it at that. I think you understand our concerns. We hope the best for the people that are making the application, that if they come on here to a retail establishment, then everything like that. But our concerns really have to do with the number of dogs, the potential of the noise. And, you know, PAC are going to have to take all these things in consideration. maybe you don't let 25 dogs go all at once. Maybe it's a more graded approach. You know, Mr. Holmes has talked about a professional coming in and a dog whisperer, if you want to call him, or whatever. But like I say, in the end of the day, I'm not sure it's a compatible use butted up against the residential area. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before the applicants come back up, is there anyone else online or in the audience willing to speak for or against this item? Third and final.
We have one more.
Sorry.
Yep, we do have one more.
Could you please state your name for the records, please?
So Eric Gauthier, my wife Cindy Gauthier, we're residents of 6 Granite Drive. Is that on the map there? So, great presentation. It sounds like they've done their homework. Our biggest concern is exactly what you've identified, is with noise, that we are in direct line of sight. And we've gone through a considerable amount of upgrades to our backyard to enjoy our backyard. And the thought of having that volume of is greatly disturbing to us. The other part is that my wife is a shift worker, and sleeping during the day is normal for her. I tend to also work shift during the spring months, so sleeping during the day is a concern with the noise. And despite best efforts to mitigate, train, correct, all of those are sort of longer term things. And the person who was speaking earlier, I didn't get his name on the screen here, made comments to the effect that, or was asking questions concerning, you know, what do you do if you have a pet? Okay, well, there are actions in place, but if your sleep's been disturbed, then your work it gets impacted, your quality of life gets impacted. So that is really our biggest concern, is with the doggy daycare itself. The retail space, I don't think that we have that much of an opposition. It sounds like a great idea. I think they would do well, just not in our backyard. So I think, was there anything
No, I don't think so. I think that's everything. It's supposed to be the level of noise.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Third and final time. Is there anyone else in the audience or online?
We do have one more.
Okay.
Hi, Mark Hatfield, property owner. One thing I just want to make clear and we take into consideration when looking at these, obviously the residents stated their case, and I understand where they're coming from. Being a dog lover, being the sponsor of the Quispamsis Dog Park and the Hampton Dog Park, I'm not sure if there's ever been any polling done around the Quispamsis Dog Park, but I've gone there many times, had functions there where there's 30, 40, 50 dogs there. And it's not that loud. I'm trying to think of the name of the street right off of Vincent, Addison Court. The residents that there, I've asked them that before because I've done a lot of work in their houses, and they said, you know, they don't notice it as well. When we look at this property at 80 Millennium, it is zone commercial, and as we continue to develop, buildings are going to get closer to the proximity.
Just a point of order. Mr. Hatfield is on behalf of the applicant, so he's providing additional information in response to the public's opportunity to speak for or against. Point of order is we need to close off that portion, and the applicants have an opportunity to respond to any comments or questions. So not sort of, we're sort of ahead of the game. So just back to the chairman having an opportunity to hear all the comments for and against, and then the applicants have an opportunity to comment further. So if we could just delay that portion.
Okay, yeah, we'll delay your portion for a second, Mark. This is the third and final time. Is there anyone in the audience willing to speak for or against this item? None being, that item's closed. The applicants can come back up along with yourself, Mr. Hatfield. You can go ahead and speak there, Mark.
Okay. Just taking into consideration the noise that's not at the dog park now, and the residents don't complain about it. The town may be able to speak on this, either Jennifer or Dwight, if they have complaints from the dog parks. When we look at 80 Millennium It's a commercially zoned site. There are some large buildings. This dog park is on the far end of one of the buildings. You know, you're approximately, I do believe you said 130 meters from it to the closest people on Granite Drive. Their presentation looks like this is going to be an amazing doggy daycare, which, you know, I think is needed in the valley. I have another applicant actually looking to rent another space there that this is what they wanted to do. However, they can't do that now. So there's definitely a need for this in our valley for our dogs. With that outdoor area, definitely some fencing would take care of a little bit. However, with their mitigating time of how many different dogs are going to be out there, I don't think it's going to be a large barking area. They're not going to fit the dynamics of what these people want for their dogs when they do their evaluation process. So just because we can say there's 25 dogs, we're thinking a large barking area. But if anybody lives on Addison or has friends that live on Addison and have been to the dog park, it's not quite the case. So that's just my my quick comments I wanted to make. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Do the applicants have any further questions before we take a motion from PAC?
Nothing for me? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may again,
Yes, Mark.
just one more question here for the applicants. How many dogs will be in the outside area at any given time?
At any given time? That's a very good question. For sure, we haven't concluded with that. I mean, we were looking to cycle the dogs through, so there wouldn't be all at once, but there's going to be, you know, depending on how many we have, like we're saying upwards to a maximum of 25. There's days there's going to be 5 dogs there. We don't really know. But if we do have the maximum of 25, there's going to be times when I would say 70% of those dogs could be outside at a given point in time. But what we're trying to do is cycle them through at different times of the day, where we'd have more of a 5 to 10 groupings at a time that would go outside.
Okay, thank you. Is that good, Mark? To answer your question?
Yes.
Kind of, yes.
Okay, with that being, any further questions from PAC before we take a motion? Ask for a motion. None being, would a member of PAC like to put a motion for or against with terms and conditions, please? Would a member of PAC like to put a motion for or against?
I'll put a motion forward that PAC approve the doggy daycare and retail business at 80 Millennium Road, PID 173435, under section 3D1 of the zoning bylaw, number 038, to a similar use as kennel. It should be subject to the following terms and conditions. Maximum of 25 dogs permitted on site at any one time. 2, the hours of operation are Monday to Friday, 7 to 6, Saturday, 9 to 5, closed on Sundays. 3, applicants provide a letter to the town from the Fundy Regional Service Committee or Commission Waste Management Branch advising the proper method of disposal of pet waste for 25 dogs prior to the issuance of a building permit. 4, fenced-in dog area found between a building 80 and 84 will not change the size location without further obtaining permission from the Planning Advisory Committee. Furthermore, no additional outdoor area for dogs is permitted without first obtaining the permission of PAC. And the fence to be a solid type of fence to reduce noise. 5, a fence permit is required prior to the erection of any fences on site. And 6, the limit to 7 dogs at any one time outside would be my motion.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Can we have a seconder on that?
Mr. Chairman, it's Brad. I'll second that.
Thank you. On the, any debate on that motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, did I say that the maximum number of dogs outside at any given time would be a maximum of 7? Did I hear that correctly?
That
Yes,
is
you did.
correct.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Can I have a clarification?
Yep, Violet?
I just want to clarify if the solid fence is required for all sides or just the rear towards the residents, as was mentioned in the meeting minutes earlier.
All sides.
Okay, with that being no other debate on that motion, can we have a vote, please?
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, Brent. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, one thing we should add there, maybe communication between the applicant and the homeowners so that the homeowners realize what the schedule is, so they know when the dogs will be outside. So, right, so you know, okay, 10 to 11, there's dogs outside, and then again from 2 to 3 or whatever. Just weather dependent, yes, but.
I'm not sure that's going to be hard. That'd be hard to police, I think, wouldn't it? I'm not. But Mr. Bishop, what do you think about that? Did you put the motion forward?
Like posting the times, is that what you're thinking? Yeah, no. Dwight?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Planning Advisory Committee. Just a reminder that when we set terms and conditions, we have to look at it through the lens of being, first of all, reasonable and then enforceable. So in some cases, we have to keep that in mind in terms of how do you enforce that, follow up on those issues. So.
Thank you, Dwight, on that clarification of that. Any other debate on the motion on the floor? Can we have a vote on that, please? That motion has been carried by a vote of 5-1. For the applicant, you'll have your letter in the mail in the next 5 to 7 business days with the approval. So please work with the town and your developer to have all necessary paperwork and documentation in place, and work with the neighbors. And the best of luck moving forward with your development.
And the board, thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that being, we'll move on to item 7D, Wright subdivision. Could the applicant please come up to the podium? In the meantime, Dwight, could you introduce that item for us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to PEC members, Vice Chair. The application, subdivision application that is before the Planning Advisory Committee was before PAC, I believe in 2018. So what it proposes is the creation of 2 residential lots in a rural area on a private street or private access. So it's before the Planning Advisory Committee under Section 5A of the subdivision bylaw, which states that any lots that are created must either front a public street owned by the municipality, or a road or a street owned by the Crown, or an alternate access as approved by the Planning Advisory Committee. So this particular subdivision is before the Planning Advisory Committee as we move through the process of reviewing and consideration of granting approval or rejecting the application. We have to bring it to Planning Advisory Committee to determine if the Planning Advisory Committee would approve a private access to allow for access to the lots being created. That is where the application stands, and that's the reason for it being before the Planning Advisory Committee. So in 2018, this item came before the Planning Advisory Committee, and a notice of decision was rendered in accordance with the subdivision bylaw as well as in accordance with the Community Planning Act. Any tentative plan, if it's not registered within 1 year from the date of tentative approval, it becomes null and void. With the exception if this was a subdivision plan that created X number of lots and some of those lots or one of those lots got registered, then obviously the tentative approval could be what they determine or what they call a renewal for those lots that didn't get registered. In this particular case, nothing was registered, nothing moved forward. So the previous approval is null and void in accordance with the subdivision bylaw and the Community Planning Act. What's important to remember, and from a planning perspective, we do this with any application that comes in and goes through this process, and registration of the subdivision plan doesn't happen, is remind the applicants that, you know, within that time frame, things can change. There are other things that go through the process that get approved. There are other precedents or other considerations that the items that we take into consideration that align with the subdivision bylaw and align with the Community Planning Act that we take when we make decisions and when we come to the Planning Advisory Committee looking for recommendations. With that in mind, when we look at this particular subdivision plan, there's a couple of things that I would like to mention as PAC looks at the application and gives consideration. First of all, we'll start with the actual private lane. So right now, in terms of our subdivision bylaw, we do not have, you know, in terms of our actual bylaw, where we can say if you're requesting a private lane, then here are the list of items that you need to basically check off. What we do have is we do have the National Building Code, which ultimately says the minimum driving surface or minimum width of any private lane or any access to a building is a minimum of 6 meter driving surface. So we've used that since 2018, and in some cases probably prior to. So that's one item that we would look at. We also have whole harmless agreements that we enter into that basically says that access must be maintained and provide a level of service, if you will, to all the lots that are gaining access from that private street. It's uninstructed, which means no matter the time of the day, that there has to be a reasonable level of effort put forward to ensure that emergency service providers can get access to those particular lots, to those particular buildings, to those particular residents within a reasonable time frame. That's what we default to. We have communicated with the KV Fire to confirm that that is the standard that we should be looking at when we have these requests, and they have always defaulted to this is what the minimum requirements are. We've applied that to a couple of other private lanes that have been approved since that time. The other item that I would bring PAC in terms of notice is in your package, and as you see on the screen, one of the items that we always look at is, obviously, and we're required to, is if you have a land area that potentially has either is on a wetland or is on a water course, then obviously there's a portion or there's an item that needs to be looked at it from a Department of Environment perspective, and the possibility of having what we call a wall. One of the other layers of information that we use is what we call a wet areas mapping or a predictive streams layer. And there's, as you see on the screen right now, there's an area of the second lot that's being shaded with a green, and then that flows into a larger area, which is a dark blue. What we use that as is basically a guide, and what we say to any developer or any applicant is our information kind of indicates that there's either possibly a on-map water course in that particular area, or there's potential for a wet area that might fall under the current definition under the Clean Water Act as an on-map water course, or a water course, if you will, or a wetland. So in this particular, the other key element that brings into is within some recent subdivisions that have been approved, and these applications have been sent to Department of Environment. What's come back is part of their recommendations, or one of their comments, is if you have a 1 acre lot, so 4,000 square meters, which is going to be serviced by on-site well and on-site septic, that portion, that 4,000 square meters, cannot be unencumbered by wet areas or areas in which you cannot put a septic field, or you're within a what would be considered a WAWA sort of regulated area. So this particular time, from our information, from a planning perspective, I would require more information to determine what that green area is. Is it an on-map watercourse? If it's an on-map watercourse, that triggers an immediate buffer of 30 meters, which means you're getting into a WAWA. Or is it a wetland? So that information right now is something that, from a planning perspective, we would need further clarification on before granting approval. My final comment with respect to this particular application is I would draw PAC's attention to section 9D of our subdivision bylaw. And what that reads is that the development officer shall not approve a subdivision plan if, in their opinion, and in the opinion of the Planning Advisory Committee. 9D2 says the proposed manner of subdividing will prejudice the possibility of future or further subdividing the land or the convenient subdividing of the adjoining lands. When I look at this particular request, and again, like I've said, we've had other requests for private lanes since this particular application, and I've given a lot of thought to this. When I look at those particular private lanes, one of the distinguishing factors is those private lanes or private streets are basically servicing land that's only owned by one particular property owner. So they create their 2 or 3 lots, and that is it. There's no other access to adjoining lands, right? That's basically either it's a cul-de-sac or it's land that are going to further develop. And for example, we've had Maple Ridge Estates, which started out as a private lane. They got 3 lots, and then they went beyond that. They created a public street. However, that land was under the ownership, right, of the developer, who had longer range plans for the remainder of that particular land area, and it didn't involve multiple property owners. When I look at this particular area and I look at the subdivision plan, when I take that and look at it against 9D, where it says prejudicing, if you're approving a private street for those 2 lots, and then the adjoining lands, which is significant tract of land, which is abutting the Kennebecasis River, and if that land gets further developed, maybe there's a subdivision plan that comes in that creates X number of lots, and that request is for let's say a private street. Now you have a private street going into a private street, which from a planning perspective, we would not approve. If it comes in as a public street, now you have a private street going into a public street, which means that private street is going to be upgraded to a public street, which means the cost of doing that is borne by the adjacent landowner. So at this point in time, when I look at that, I'm looking at it in terms of what level of prejudice, if you will, is being is coming into play in terms of future development of the adjoining lands. So that's something I think PAC would need to take into consideration when they look at this application. Is there, and to my knowledge, we have received correspondence from the adjoining property owner who has discussed, potentially cost-sharing arrangements and those types of things, which was an item of discussion when this application was raised before, to that level. So again, I do want to raise that particular item in our subdivision bylaw, that in this particular case would be applicable because it does have some impacts on the future subdividing or convenience thereof in the future. I'll leave it at that, and as always, I'm open to questions moving through. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwight, for that update. Could the applicants please state their name for the record, please?
Brian Wright.
And Joe Roberts of Delmore Surveys, an engineer.
Okay, thank you. You would have received the same package we did in the mail. Is there anything you'd like to add or discuss prior to members of the public or PAC asking you some questions?
I don't think so. I think Dwight's summed it up pretty well in his report. I don't think there was anything else that I wanted to touch on at this point anyway until we discuss some other things.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant from members of PAC?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yep, go ahead, Mark.
I understand like there's no turnaround at the end of Misty Cove Lane. Is there a plan to put put a garbage truck, for example, or somebody to go and pick up the garbage to turn around at the end of Misty Cove Lane, or there's going to be a pad at the beginning, I guess, of Misty Cove Lane? Because I wouldn't want to have garbage in front of my house if I live on Misty Cove Lane, versus like would the garbage truck be able to go to the end of Misty Cove Lane, pick up the garbage from those two new properties?
Yes, there was a plan to build an 8x8 pad at the end of Misty Cove Lane. I contacted Faro and they said that they would be okay with it.
So it will be at the end of Misty Cove Lane. It will not be at where the last property, the town street is today. Am I correct?
It would be right at the beginning of the first lot.
Okay, my point is should the pad be located at the end of Misty Cove Lane, not at the beginning?
At the end of Misty Cove Lane.
I'm not sure if I'm clear enough here. I'm sorry. I apologize. But
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if the private street gets created, it is my understanding that it would be continued to have the name Misty Cove Lane, but it's going to be flagged as private. To Mr. Gosling's question, the garbage trucks will not go down a private lane. They won't back down past the end of the two lots that are being proposed to be created. They will basically come to the end of the public street, and that is it. So to my knowledge, they don't go down the private lanes, which is the case we see with other private lanes in the municipality, such as Angel Lane, and I believe Morrison Lane. They have to put the garbage basically at the end of the public street. So they basically would go to the end of, I think it's 503, somewhere around that particular area. Basically, where the asphalt ends is where they, as far as they would go. So the waste reciprocal would have to be put in that particular location. They don't get, again, through you, Mr. Chair, people on private lanes do not get waste removal services under municipal contracts that we currently have to residential properties. That's on their, right. Unless they're responsible, they do, but they're responsible to get, I'll clarify, they get it picked up by the garbage truck, but they're responsible to get the garbage to the point. Yeah.
Thank you, Dwight, for clarifying. Another question here. How about this, the plow, the snow removal? Where would the snow go? If, again, it's the same thing, the snow plow cannot turn around at the end of the lane, where would the snow going to be piled?
I would assume it would be piled in the same spot it has been plowed. I opened the opening of the road myself with a plow truck, and I have a tractor with the plow and a snowblower on it. So I would assume that it would be in the same spot that it's always been. They kind of just push it off to the side into the ditch.
What ditch? Because it's a lane, the truck will not be able to go there.
The end of Misty Cove Lane is always open. They just plow to the end of Misty Cove Lane. And then we plow from the end of Misty Cove Lane into the private driveway. Okay, so which property would the snow go on from
from the town of Quispamsis snow removal trucks? Would it go on the existing property owner before the start of the at the end of 503, let's say Vista Cove Lane, or would go past that?
It basically just goes to the end of Misty Cove Lane on the first lot. They kind of push it off to both sides is kind of what they do.
Okay. One more question. Would it be possible to have it like at the end of Mr. Cove Lane where the two additional lots are proposed to have it turn around so the garbage truck or whoever, like even for the locals, people, a lot of people I understand. I spoke to a couple landowner close by. I understand a lot of people are using their driveway to turn around because they cannot turn around on any other location past this additional section of Mr. Cove Lane. So would it be possible to have a turnaround lane at the end of the two lots that we're proposing here?
I would prefer not to myself. I know I don't turn around in their dooryard. If there's any traffic that's coming that way, it would be off of Rockefeller, not off of any of our private laneway.
No, I understand that part, but my point is people driving, going in that area, they got no place to turn around. So they have to use a present owner of a property to turn around. They have to use their driveway of a present owner. So would it be possible to have at the end of where your proposed two lots is, you're looking at, would it be possible to have a turnaround lane for people wanting to turn around instead of using the existing owner's driveway?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may, to
Yep.
Mr. Gosselin. So a turnaround wouldn't, if there was a turnaround created at the end of the proposed private lane extension, public would not be able to go in there because the private lane basically is to the right of passage for those lots that have access off of it. So the only way that a turnaround could be created would be either it would have to be constructed within the existing public right-of-way, which basically ends at just past 503. So you'd have to fit it within that 20-meter right-of-way. Or Mr. Wright would have to extend the public street to an area whereby a turnaround could be created vested to the municipality. Right? So a private street does not grant access to municipal equipment or any of the public to actually go on a private street. Private street is to the benefit of those that have a deeded right-of-way to them. So essentially, if a passerby is going onto the private street, in essence, they're trespassing. So that's the only way that a turnaround could be created is either in the existing right-of-way or there would have to be a portion of the subdivision would be to actually create a portion of the private street to public and create a public turnaround.
Okay. And one more question, Mr. Chairman, if I have the time. With those two lots being developed out there, there's going to be an increased flow of water. Today, for example, the water going through the ditch, and it's going to go through the access to the beach on Rockefeller out there. And there's already an issue with some wetland at the end of the water overflowing, I guess, on one of the property owner. So is there any plan to mitigate that or so we don't cause additional water issue with the property owner in this case, for example, located at 503 Mr. Cove Lane?
I planned on doing a couple ditches down there and just joining it into the culvert that's already in place at the end of Misty Cove Lane.
Yeah, but the existing culvert, for example, is already causing some minor problem, I understand. So with the additional water flow coming from the two new lots being developed, there's going to be an increased water flow of water going through and eventually ending up in the Kennebecasis River out there. So if there is an increase of water flow, more than likely is going to be an impact on the property owner. Which is already a minor, some minor issue, I understand. So how can we rectify that or try to mitigate, I guess, the problem here on the property owner?
As far as my understanding is the pathway that goes down to the beach now is a little bit higher than what their property is now, so it should run in the same direction as what it always has been running prior to them building there.
Okay, but we're gonna generate more water flow going through down that culvert there. So, okay, I appreciate your comment. Thank you.
Any further questions from members of PAC to the applicant?
I'm not sure if my question is for the applicant or Dwight. Who developed Misty Cove to the end of the paved area? Who was that developer?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Again, off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure it would have been the developer of Misty Cove in that particular area, which would have been Riverfront Properties at the time. So I think it was a requirement when 503 was created, I believe, that was extended and made a public street.
Okay, so would have a developer who developed that to make a turnaround so the plows could go down there and turn, not on the private part of Misty Cove Lane. Should that be a turnaround before it gets to the private area?
So when the initial subdivision plan came in, it was reviewed by planning as well as engineering, and at the time, because it was basically one lot beyond the intersection, it was felt that in terms of plowing and those types of operations, the equipment could basically back down that particular section and plow that way, right? So there are other precedents in the town where we look at if it's a single lot, whether a turnaround or those types of things, a temporary turnaround or a cul-de-sac is necessary, because the overall plan, in terms of the long-range plan, has been looking at the potential of Misty Cove eventually, because you never say never in the planning world, going up and meeting up to Means Cove Road at some point in time.
Because it seems to trying to fix this, getting somebody else to fix this problem was not caused by the people applying now. Maybe I'm wrong. I feel that should be, public street and then a turnaround, but we do have development on private lots. And I thought we had this come up before, and if there was another lot, then we have to make that a public street. But right now, 2 lots before, the same thumbs were here in 2018, I think. Those are the same 2 lots. And I thought we said, okay, we'll do these 2, but if you want to do more, you have to upgrade that road. Maybe I'm wrong, but I also talked to a person out there walking with their dog, and they love it just the way it is. It's a beautiful, and I violated that. I went right straight down there and check it out. It's nice, not a bad road.
There's a lot of people that enjoy that laneway, walking their dogs and stuff.
And there's always going to be an issue.
Through you, Mr. Chair,
Yep.
and I will go back to one of my comments in sort of my intro to this particular application. These things are before the Planning Advisory Committee, and it's the Planning Advisory Committee who renders the decision whether they wish to grant the creation of 2 lots that don't front a municipal street, and then they establish the terms and conditions of what that would be in terms of, and as I referred to, the minimum standards for private lanes that we follow. One of the things that, as I mentioned, is that we don't have a trigger. We don't have, if you have a private lane, once you go beyond 2 lots or 3 lots, it automatically triggers the need for a public street. We do not have that currently. So it's at, again, the discretion of the Planning Advisory Committee based on the location, based on all the other elements that are involved, right? When one of the questions that has been raised is about stormwater management. What impacts will that have? How will it be addressed in this? You know, is it, as I've mentioned, is it prejudicing other future developments in the area? That needs to be taken into consideration. There's already 2 existing lots, now you're adding additional 2. You know, given the time that's lapsed and things that we've learned in that particular 4 or 5 years, you know, are there things that we've learned from that we want to apply to this? So, you know, that's the reason these things are before the planning advisory, to review it and to render a decision. The other thing, you know, you have 1 year. So you come, PACs makes a decision, you have 1 year to register that plan. If it's not registered, it's null and void, which means that terms and conditions and those such of things are null and void. It's in your information, it's in your package in terms of reference. Here's what came before, here's what the items that were discussed. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dwight. Any further questions for the applicant from PAC members?
Yes, I'd like to speak. Again, as everybody knows, my name's Darren Bishop. I live at 521 Misty Cove Lane. I've been on PAC, I guess, for the past, since probably 2017, possibly, for quite a few years. I've always, stated my opinion on, building commercial, residential. I'm always been very pro construction. I'm, most things that come up, I'm looking for the town of Quispamsis to grow and prosper, whether it's residentially or commercially. I've also stated my opinion many times in the past on private lanes, that I am not in favor of private lanes. Certain, things that you look at. Garbage is one of them. Snow plowing is another one. People living on there, they're paying taxes, they're not getting services that they're paying for. And there are certainly times and conditions when a private lane, works well, as Dwight mentioned. Developer comes in with a whole plan. They've got basically a site plan done and for future development. They're just looking to get started, so they're starting off with a private lane, and then as they move, forward, it gets, built up to a public street. In this case here, it's a bit of a hodgepodge. There's Misty Cove Lane, which goes all the way up to the Means Cove Road. Right now, there's 3 homes on it, possibly 2 more with these 2 lots. Mr. Wilson has made a comment too, has sent a letter in about possibly subdividing his land, so whether, which is quite a large parcel of land, which could get subdivided into 2 or 3 lots. So, there's 5 just new lots, 3 existing houses. And then there's also a piece of property that kind of butts in there, the Scott and Shannon property too, that's possibly to get developed in the future as well. So I just want to state my fact. I have nothing, against Mr. Wright. Again, I am a resident of Misty Cove Lane. This does not affect me and how I get to and from my home. But it is something as a private street that I am not in favor of.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Bishop. Any further questions from PAC?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, Mark again here, if I may. Just to make sure here, I'm looking at the plan here and I don't see where that 8x8 pad's going to be constructed. Is it going to be constructed on lot number 18.1?
Yes.
It will be on 18.1, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from members of PAC? Is there anyone online or in the audience willing to speak for or against this item?
Yes, we do have someone here.
Okay, could the applicants please be seated, and that person could please come up and state their name for the record, please.
My name's Glenn Beers, and my wife and I own the property at 503 Misty Cove Lane. And for the record, we're not against the development of 2 lots. What we want to make sure is that it's done right. That you've only really got one chance If you start giving people leeway, where does it really end? From a personal perspective of what our concern is, one is the water flow. That right now, all the water flows towards our property at 503. That's where the culvert is. It's just, if you look at the map there, right by where it says 497, and that's the path that goes down for public access. There's two culverts. So the water flows down there, then it goes down basically about 3/4 of the way to the water on 497, and then cuts across the bottom part of our property. And I agree that that is the natural water flow. But when you start clearing lots and you start directing water, that's where it all flows. It's not, you don't get reabsorption into the ground, you don't get it spreading out, it's all going through one area. So what we end up with in the bottom part of our property, even though it is a wetland, is marshy area. On the path that goes down to that belongs to the Rockefeller Association, that the trail already is starting to wash out because of when we get heavy rains. I want to make sure that that's addressed properly. You know, the garbage pad, I'd prefer not to have it just because no one wants that at the end of their property. We had an experience at our old house where we lived that our neighbor there only put their garbage out once every 3 months, and when they did, it was a mess. I want to make sure that there's no mess there. I also feel that if it's not it should be a public road, but if it's not, if it's a private, that there should be a turnaround. There is, surprisingly, that for the few amount of people that live down there, there is an awful pile of traffic that go down there. Nosy people, I guess. I'm not sure, but they do end up turning in our driveway. We do have a dog. We have invisible fencing, but she could get hit sometime, and it should be. I just feel like these things should be addressed. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beers. Is there anyone else online or in the audience willing to speak for or against this item? Third and final time, is there anyone in the audience willing to speak for or against this item? None being, could the applicant please come back up to the podium, please? Just for the applicant, you would have seen the same package with all the letters of concern and emails. Is there anything you like to discuss or talk about that, or are you okay with what was said?
Well, as for the water drainage, I've never personally seen any water run through that culvert myself as of right now. And I know, like myself, even living on a private lane, I've had to deal with it myself of water drainage issues, which I'm sure everybody in that same area probably has the same issue.
I have a question, I guess, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Colburn. I guess in this approval 4 years ago, there was supposed, I guess you have your engineer here, Mr. Wright, that this road was supposed to be brought up, to 20 meters, 6 meters of hard pan, and the water to be taken care of. Is it not the responsibility of the developer, Mr. Coburn, to direct the water off of someone else's property, not onto somebody else's property?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Bishop. What will be required is, again, the 6 meter driving surface, which means that would have to be done as we've requested of other applicants and developers who develop on private lane, that we would have an engineer review that. And any development, you're not permitted to drain or direct water from your development onto adjacent properties. So as I alluded to in my introduction, there is an area of lot 18-2 that, in my opinion, seems to be a wet, or is being indicated as being wet. So there will have to be some sort of a review and possibly delineation undertaken. And I would be looking for, in this particular case, as a development officer, prior to approving any plan, a stormwater management, comprehensive stormwater management plan that would look at where all the water is coming in terms of the road once it's constructed. Because once this road is brought up to a 6-meter driving surface, then obviously you're introducing ditches, and then where's that water going, and how is it being retained? So that would be a requirement that I would be looking for if the plan were to get approved.
Thank you, Dwight. For the applicant, is there any feeling on yourself to make it a public road up to the end of the two properties, or that's not in the business plan?
It wasn't really part of the plan. I'd like to kind of keep it private. I know my son and myself and quite a few of the neighbors enjoy the privacy, and of being a private laneway is kind of how I intended on keeping it.
Is that you're hoping to continue that on for the whole future expansion also, or do you have an overall plan, I guess, that you can share?
As long as I'm there, I'd like to.
How many more lots are in your plan, I guess we would ask?
Well, I own just over 17 acres, and
okay.
I probably occupy about 5 of it now for my own personal spot. The rest of it, obviously, it would take a lot of work to get it to be to the point where you'd want to sell a lot, I guess, and that's just really not in my plans right at the present moment.
Okay, thank you. That being said, is there any further questions? Any PAC members have any questions before we take it to the motion? None being, would a member of PAC?
Hold on, Mr. Coburn's comment.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like, as you move forward and take into consideration or putting a motion forward, from a development offer perspective, and as I referred to Section 9D2 of the subdivision bylaw, I would just like and would need to know PAC's position on whether the proposed subdivision in any way prejudices future subdividing of adjoining lands. As I mentioned, the subdivision bylaw states the development officer shall not approve a subdivision plan if, in their opinion and in the opinion of the Planning Advisory Committee, the proposed manner of subdividing will prejudice the possibility of further subdividing the land or the convenient subdividing of the adjoining land. It's the item regarding the convenient subdividing of the adjoining land, in which I would need to know the PAC's opinion as it relates to that particular section in the subdivision bylaw. If that can be either clearly indicated in your recommendations, if you were to put a motion forward, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwight. Would a member of PAC like to put a motion for or against with terms and conditions, please?
I'd like to put a motion forward that PAC do not approve the Wright subdivision Phase 1 private lane. I am in favor of a public street, but not as a private lane. So that would be my motion.
Is there a seconder on that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay. With that motion in place, is there any debate on that motion? With that being said, can we have a vote on that motion?
So we're voting on denying the application, am I correct?
Correct. Correct, Mark.
Mr. Coburn has a comment.
Mr. Coburn, please proceed.
Just as clarification, you're voting on the proposal to create a public street in this particular case, not the actual subdivision application. That's a decision that's rendered by the development officer. So the motion as put forward would be regarding the public street, and that's what the motion was. So just a point of clarification to Mr. Gosland's statement regarding to deny the application. The motion is whether you support a public street or a private street. So, thank you.
So with that being said, the motion is carried by a vote of 4-2 that it's declined as a private street, that the motion was to the applicant to build a public street, correct?
That is correct, and is in my motion, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Coburn?
Yes, that would be what was put forward, and that was what the vote was on. Just through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant, that would indicate that the subdivision plan would have to be revisited in terms of whether it's a combination of a private or a public, or just a review of how alternate access can be provided to service those two lots.
Yeah, so with that being said, for the applicant, in 5 to 7 business days, you're going to have your letter in the mail with the denial of the application, and we encourage you to come back and work out between the town and yourselves an application that is suitable and valid within the town of Quispamsis.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. That being said, let's move on to item 7E, which is the William Hickey subdivision. Is there any applicants for that, Dwight, in the audience? I didn't see that in the memo, that's all.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so this particular application is requesting a lot area variance of 300 square meters to address a couple of items from a previous approved subdivision plan. Those two items were the encroachment of a driveway to 118, as well as the septic field of 118 is actually encroaching at this particular time onto 116. So what the two property owners are doing through this application is addressing those issues. Would be to provide a sufficient land area so to be consolidated. So creating parcel A to consolidate with 118 to ensure the septic field servicing 118 is on the correct property, as well as to address the encroachment of the driveway. As I've stated in my staff report, the reduction is about 300 square meters from the minimum requirement of 4,000 square meters. So at this stage, I require a variance from the Planning Advisory Committee to move forward with approving the plan. My recommendations is provided in my staff report. Again, open to any questions PAC members may have.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, Dwight, I have one quick question. Is parcel A going to PID 655 or 663?
It's going to 663.
In the back. Okay,
Yes,
in the
that's
back.
correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Any members of PAC have any questions regarding that? None being, is there anyone in the audience willing to speak for or against that item? Is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? Third and final time, is there anyone in the audience willing to speak for or against that item? None being, would a member of PAC like to put a motion for or against with terms and conditions?
Mr. Chairman, I put a motion forward that we grant a lot area variance for 116 Neck Road, PID number 5655, so the William Hickey amending subdivision plan submission can be approved by the development officer subject to the following conditions. Number one, the replacement or upgrade to the on-site sewage disposal system must be approved by appropriate provincial authority and may require the installation of a non-conventional system with associated costs being the responsibility of the property owner. Number two, plans are signed by the property owners. And number three, filling fees at the amount of $100.
Thank you, Mark. Can I have a seconder on that?
Mr. Chairman, it's Brent, I'll second that.
Any debate in the motion? None being, can we have a vote on that, please? I don't see the vote button, but voting up. Is it up?
Yeah, motion was carried.
Okay, I didn't see it on my screen. That's all. Sorry about that. Thank you. Motion carried. You can let the applicant know there, Dwight, in the next little bit of time that everything's been proceeded and approved. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to item F, the zoning bylaw amendment, zoning bylaw 038 amendments.
Yep, Mr. Chair, Mr. Coburn has asked for a 5-minute recess.
Certainly.
So with
have that.
Yep.
5 minutes?
5 minutes?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Chrissy?
Yes.
It's Darren here, and I know we're still online, but is there a way that I can see that the screen when I'm on the view here, WebEx? I see a screen called planning at quispamsis.ca host, but there's nothing. There's nothing on it.
That allows us to stream you as you speak.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
it's either or.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Perfect. No, it's all right. I thought I might have been missing something. So
Through you, Mr. Chair, I was wondering if I would be in order for me to request just a 5-minute recess so we can get set up for the presentation and make sure it's in order, and then we can come back and I don't know if we can live stream.
yeah, we do that. Yeah, we're gonna do that.
Anyway, we did it already. Well, I want my 5 minutes.
Okay, you got your 5 minutes.
We are going to flip it to the presentation instead of showing you on the screen, so you will see it.
Awesome.
Don't worry.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Is everybody ready from the 5-minute recess?
I think we were waiting for Dwight, weren't we, to get set up?
No, if we are set up, we're waiting for Mr. Goslin. Mr. Goslin is back. And yeah, you are on.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And
Are you able to see the first screenshot of the Town of Quispamsis proposed zoning bylaw on your WebEx screens?
I do, Mark, here.
Darren?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
okay, so we've been asked to, by the town clerk, this has been brought forward to council, the zoning bylaw amendment 38-41, and they have now asked for PAC's comments on this proposed zoning bylaw amendment. And what we're going to speak about, we're introducing development permits, and I'll discuss sort of why we're doing that now. And then we'll also be discussing some of the housekeeping items that we'd like to tidy up as part of this amendment. So we get legislative authority currently for what we do in providing approvals from the Community Planning Act and from the Building Code Administration Act. Now, the Building Code Administration Act has been introduced by the Government of New Brunswick, and it is to administer the building code. Now, there have been changes brought forward in the last, I think, year or so. That is going to see a change to what is permitted or what has given authority under the Building Code Administration Act. And also what I want to discuss is the minimum land use planning, development, and building services that we, the PAC and the planning staff and the town provide to the community. I'm sort of zipping through this a little fast, sorry about that, but I want to get to sort of the building permits in Quispamsis and the current mechanisms that we use. And so currently we issue permits for dwelling units, commercial, industrial, institutional, change use, general land development, accessory buildings, swimming pools, fences, decks, and detached garages. And once the changes come in after December 31st of this year, no longer are we going to see authority under the Building Code Administration Act to support anything other than development permits, commercial industrial developments, and institutional. So the other permits no longer will have authority given to them under the Building Code Administration Act. And it's just listing it here, accessory buildings not intended for overnight accommodations, and that includes detached garages, a building with a total gross floor area not exceeding 56.8, not greater than 56.8 square meters, intended for an overnight accommodation, fences, swimming pools and decks, general land development, and change of use. No longer will a building permit cover those. So we're going to suggest, what we're proposing is that we close the gap with development permits as being a new tool. So those would cover those items that no longer are covered. So what is a development permit? A development permit is a certificate authorizing a person to build a fence, swimming pool, garage, etc. They're issued for any development, and we would like, what our proposal is for development permits to be included for all development, and that would include even subdivision site work, grubbing, like any of the prep work. They would have to provide plans and receive approvals before they could proceed. So really, we want development permits for every application, a dwelling, multi-residential, regardless of what it is. And that will provide us an opportunity from a planning perspective to ensure that it meets all the setbacks, that all of the zoning bylaw requirements are met, the municipal plan is been vetted as well. It's just to ensure that it's really living up to our expectations. And why now? Well, I think it's because there's a deadline of December 31st this year. So currently, when you apply for any permit, there's a one-stop shop. You're applying for a building permit right now. So in the future, if development permits are approved, if the zoning bylaw amendment is approved, we would see a development permit for accessory buildings, fence, deck, swimming pools, change of use, and general land. You would get a development permit, and then you would receive you could do your construction once you have your permit. So the next, we'll look at it, dwelling unit, commercial, industrial, and institutional. You'll get a development permit, a building permit as well. And then once you get both of those items, then you can proceed to development. So we already have a lot of communities, local municipalities that are issuing development permits. Moncton, Riverview, Hampton, Rothsay, St. John, Grand Bay, Westfield, and local regional service districts. We thought we'd take a look at the 10-year trend, building permits sort of versus development permits. What is it going to look like? So we separated them out, and the blue is your development permit, and the orange are building permits. So over the last 10 years, so it's been sort of a growing trend, as we can see from the trend line, but there's always been sort of twice as many smaller permits, or what we would now be calling development permits, being issued in comparison to for building permits. And the 10-year comparison would be 40 and 60. And now we're looking at money. The 10-year look at the numbers does show a very large sort of disproportionate division of money. So 95% of the fees are collected through building permits, where 5% are collected through development permits. But all improvements increase land value, so we want to keep that in mind. So why should we care? Development reviews make for good neighbors. People don't build fences where they're not supposed to. Sheds aren't in someone else's yard. There's several reasons why we would like to have these development reviews to continue. It keeps peace in the family, if you will. Strategic plan outlines policies that support our community development. And again, improvements increase land values. So the impacts to the community, we want it to be as seamless as possible and outward facing. We really think that the transition is going to be such. The application and review process, if you're applying for a fence, you're applying for just simply the same application. You're submitting it on the outside. Looking in, there's going to be really no difference. The permit fees were remaining the same for those accessories. There are slight changes to the fee schedule. So there will also be a development permit review of any residential component, any dwelling units, and non-residential will also have a development permit review. And the residential DP review, I believe we have at $50 per dwelling unit, and the non-residential, I believe off the top of my head, is $250. And that's it for development permits. Now we'll move straight on into our housekeeping items. We can talk about surface drainage, building and driveway elevations, development officer approvals, garden suites, also known as coach homes, and cannabis.
Jennifer, could you just pause for one moment, please?
Sure.
Yep. Violet ran out of power.
Violet needs power. So the first item on the housekeeping items is actually a reintroduction of a provision that was once in the building bylaw, and in the last iteration, it was no longer in the building bylaw, so we just want to reintroduce it and put it in the zoning bylaw, and it's basically saying that your surface water can't be spilled over onto your neighbor's property. You have to manage your surface water on your own property, so good drainage makes for good neighbors. Driveway elevations. So we have a provision about a hold harmless agreement for homes that are in dwelling units that are built less than 1 meter below the center grade of the road. We'd like to look at driveways similarly, and that would be for an incline or a decline. After 10 degrees, it becomes very difficult for emergency vehicles to navigate some of these driveways that are steeper. So we're suggesting that anything over 10% would require a hold harmless agreement with the town, and that could be approved by the development officer or through PAC, and a hold harmless agreement would be required. And we would like to strengthen the development officer's approvals. So he would be able to approve building driveway elevation variances, waterfront property approvals, and the developments that are near to a stream or water course. I think the intent there originally was to ensure that these issues of water were brought forward so we could get that idea of 30 meters of development from a water stream or a water course into everyone's head. And now it's been established. It's an ordinary course for us to do in our day-to-day. So I think it's something that could be managed quite easily with staff. We would like to introduce provisions for garden suites or coach homes. As PAC members, you're aware that we have brought forward a number of garden suites and have provided provisions. This just will bring it and make it provided a home in the zoning bylaw, if you will. And so staff will have some, good, strong provisions there to guide us. They are increasing in popularity, as we know. We see more and more applications all the time. And cannabis, there was a directive by the province, 2018, 2019. It says that production facilities can only occur in light industrial, inside an enclosed building, and it also speaks of retail sales, and they cannot be located within 150 meters of a school, and production facilities can't be any closer than 300 meters from a residential neighborhood. So that's a directive straight from the province that we're just including in the zoning bylaw. And the floor is now open to any questions.
I have two.
Okay.
One is on the garden suites.
Mm-hmm.
What's the consideration for the water, sewer, and electrical service? Any ideas yet on that?
They would be the same provisions that we've been bringing forward to you as PAC. So I believe the water comes from the house, the electrical has to be underground, and sewer connection, I believe, is independent.
Can the electrical have its own subservice, like from the utility itself, a separate meter?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And the other one, which is our famous one, which we talked about tonight, is private driveways. Is there any consideration? Is that an amendment to the bylaw that private driveways be limited to 2 lots? Is that something we can add in, or that goes against the flow?
That will be something, Mr. Chair, that'd be something that's going to be addressed in 2 locations. First of all, in the subdivision bylaw, because it usually refers to subdivision of land. So that's something that's being addressed through that process. We are in that process of getting a new subdivision bylaw, as well as in the past year and a bit, we've engaged the services of a consultant who's reviewed our subdivision bylaw, subdivision specifications, and what we've done is we've separated those documents, so now we have a general spec for all municipal work, whether it's related to a subdivision or if it's capital work. And then the next step in that process is to bring forward a new subdivision bylaw that will be coming hopefully in 2023. So that work is being undertaken, and private lanes or private streets will be taken into consideration in that. That's something that will be coming back to PAC for review. At that time, again, in the Community Planning Act, it provides what content can go into a subdivision bylaw. The Community Planning Act doesn't actually state that you actually have to have private lanes. So if it becomes through this process, the desire of both Planning Advisory Committee, as they would be providing recommendations to council who would actually ultimately enact the bylaw, if it's a desire of both council or PAC that private streets no longer be entertained in Quispam, then that would be something that would go through that process. So it's definitely on the radar, and it's going to be included as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Awesome. Thank you. No, thank you. One more question, I guess, before. Oh, sorry, someone was ahead of me. Go ahead.
I'll go ahead, Darren.
No, I just had the other question about the development permits, the title, and the removal of the building permits. Has the town consulted other municipalities? Are they doing similar things, or are they doing something totally different? Or, is just wondering where Quispamsis is fitting within, the neighboring utilities, or are we going on our own type of thing?
That's a great question. And as was shown in my slide earlier, and I'm not sure if you got to see that or not, that most of the communities around us, most municipalities are already using development permits. And
That's what I thought. Okay.
The development permit will not be replacing a building permit per se. You'll still require a building permit for commercial, institutional developments, but okay, I just wanted to make sure that you.
Yeah. Okay. I must have missed it. I was here, but I must have missed that slide. Sorry.
No problem.
My question is, I guess, as the town's going through this process, and there seems to be a lot of housekeeping, for lack of a better word. Some of the things that come to PAC, such as, we end up with these oversized garages because they're 1 meter too high, or they're the square metage, or garage comes because it's going to be 6 meters too big for the existing bylaw. Are those things going to change also, and just kind of, I guess, move forward to today's standards?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Preston. So the amendment that's before PAC right now is addressing some of the, if you will, hot button items or hot button issues that we need to address as soon as we can. Those types of items are something that are in the queue to look at an overall larger revamp to the zoning bylaw, which is actually taking place in 2023 as part of our interim review of the municipal plan. So yeah, those things are in the queue to look at.
I have a couple of questions. One about what you're just discussing, the oversized garage. When you read the draft, it says a reasonable variance from requirements. The development officer can approve those, but is there a percentage, or it's just, yeah, that's reasonable for me? To me, it should be a percentage of it, like 10% or something like that. But this just says reasonable, but I don't see an interpretation of the word reasonable. So that was one thing. The other thing that came to my mind is we're talking about the development permit. How do you appeal it if you don't, agree with what the development permit says? Like if they deny it, how do you appeal it? Because if it's a building permit, you go to the planning appeal board. But that, I don't know if they would accept appeals for a development permit. Just my question.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So first question, what's reasonable? So some municipalities actually do, and it's a very good point, and it's something that we will have a look at, is some municipalities actually establish percentages. So they say up to 10%, it can be development officer, or up to 20% and beyond that, and that goes to PAC. What I would be doing, or a designate would be doing, we would take the same approach. We would look at, what is that percentage? And I think it would be good, and a very good point that we can look at to actually put that in the bylaw. But from a review perspective, we would sort of use it as a guideline. And if I were to, if I were to get something that was 50%, I would be more comfortable bringing it to the Planning Advisory Committee, and we have that authority. If we get an application that we feel, or a variance request that we feel is something that the Planning Advisory Committee should look at, the development officer can bring it to the Planning Advisory Committee to consider. So that's a very good point. To the second question, and now it's in my mind.
You're waiting for more?
Yes.
Again, when I read appeals, yes, how do you appeal it?
Any permit or that falls under the Community Planning Act is appealable through the Planning Appeal Board. So it would be the same as the building permit.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. The other thing, I look at the details. I know the development permits, whoever that doing that has quite a broad band of things that they can do. Don't have a problem with that. But when you start to read the details, and I wonder what page that was on, the development permit, okay, you have to get one for erecting, replacing, relocating, removing, demolishing, altering, and repairing your building. So if I want to repair my deck, take it, put a few boards down, I have to get a development permit. If I want to repair the fascia on my house, I have to have a development permit. I don't agree with the repair, because it's to me, when you're looking at development permit required, I don't have absolutely no issue with that, except what my sense of humor when it says you can't, disturb soil, measure in mud, measure in depth or lake greater, you can't get a grave. I'm sorry, that's just me, my black humor. Anyway, but when you start looking at the details, that's when it says, you can't repair your property, your own property, without a development permit. That's where I have problems.
I think there are some exemptions in there that say what you don't require a development permit for.
Yep, you're absolutely.
3.3B.
Yeah, but it's not as clear as it should be.
If you look at the summary, it says interior does not require a development permit, and if you're doing repairs and it doesn't change the footprint of your house, you don't require a permit. It's in the summary.
But you might require a building permit. I was reading there. Destroyed.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so if it would require a building permit if you're changing windows and you're changing egress and those types of things, which is a requirement under the National Building Code. Yeah.
It also references the sign permit as
Correct.
well.
Yep.
It says alterations to the interior of the building that does not involve a change of use, alterations to the exterior of a building that does not increase the exterior dimensions or size, and changes to the copy of a sign where the sign copy area does not increase pursuant to the town sign bylaw. So that would not require a development permit.
So through you, Mr. Chair, we can take Ms. Fowley's point and review absolutely, and do appreciate the feedback, and this is why we're doing this tonight.
You what?
Appreciate the feedback, and this is why we're doing this tonight. It's like more hands make light work, more eyes give better opinions.
Yeah, no, that's good. There are some valid points. If you got to do decking on your,
Thank you.
replace some decking or railing on your existing deck, it's probably not required. I would suspect, but let's clarify that.
Railings, yes. Life safety.
That I have issues with. Altering, I don't. Repairing, yes.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, because I work with the building inspection department as well, there's a lot of those questions that come through me, and there will be permits not required, such as the deck boards. If you're only repairing the deck boards, you don't need a permit, right? So it's going to follow the same life safety standards. If you're replacing the railings or you're replacing the framework, you would. Same as the roof, it's not a life safety issue. So this is how the building inspection department handles it now, and we'll be following a lot of those same life safety issues, so long as it's not changing the footprint of a deck or the framing of a deck, like those little things.
Again, it's only the word repair. Issues with. I can't repair my own house without a development permit.
That's so they get, so we can go back to the assessment department, say someone's fixing their house.
There's certain limits, I guess, that go above and beyond, right? You can always put a new roof on with a building, but you can put a new roof on without a building permit, correct?
Shingles only, without a permit. If you're taking the boards out, you need a permit.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Please don't speak unless microphone's on. Can't hear. I know. I'm trying to help.
Any other comments, questions? This concludes this portion of this evening.
I think we'll move to item 9, or item G, I guess. PAC meeting time change. There's a proposal in
point.
Oh, go ahead.
Point of order.
Sorry.
To Mr. Chair, as this is a amendment to the zoning bylaw, council was looking for the written comments of Planning Advisory Committee regarding the proposed amendment. So we would need a motion of the Planning Advisory Committee with any comments that they wish to bring back to council in response to the zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay, thanks, Dwight. Violet, would you have captured any of our comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. I think the comments that would be reasonable, again, it's PAC's discretion at what they provide back to council. But from the comments that I gather, as well as Ms. Jarvis, the two items would be regarding the reasonable variance, so whether we look at introducing some sort of percentages as to what the development officer can grant, what should come back to Planning Advisory Committee, as well as looking at the use of the word repair as it relates to the issuing of development permits. I think those are sort of the two
because mine were just general questions, so yeah. So can we have a motion to...
Just hold on one moment, please, while that's comment.
Just a question, what was it, Dwight? The wording of the reasonable definition and then revisit the wordings of repair. What was your third one?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think that was the two. Yeah. And in response to Ms. Valley's comment regarding being in excess of a meter, you can't dig a grave. You'd have to take that one up with the province. That's the complete definition of development. So I think there's an exemption to that.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the zoning bylaw amendments with suggested recommendations or changes to be looked into?
Mr. Chairman, it's Brad. I'll make the following motion that council proceed with the zoning bylaw amendment process to move forward with the adoption of proposed zoning bylaw amendment number 038-41, introducing development permits along with the general housekeeping items to improve the zoning bylaw. A motion was put forward at the PAC meeting tonight, and the recommendations that came forward are to be presented to council.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder on that?
Second, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Any debate? Can we have a vote on that, please? Is the vote approved? I don't see it on my screen.
Yes, it was 6-0.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. The vote's unanimously approved at 6-0. So Dwight, best of luck for getting that with council, and please bring any feedback from our suggested comments. Thank you. We'll move on to item 7G. An amendment put forward that PAC approval to amend the start time of the Planning Advisory Committee from the current time of 7 p.m. till 6 p.m. Violet, you want to give any background on that? Or I can.
The council had determined to put a test trial through for 3 months to change their start time from 7 p.m. to 6 p.m. as well. After 3 months, it was determined that it was in favor for all members, and PAC is just following suit with the suggestion that we start earlier. And as we start earlier, we will then back up our end time to 10 p.m. instead of 11 p.m. Thank you.
No, that's good. And I think, earlier on, there was some talk about it not working out, but I think now it seems beneficial to do that. So with that being said, I have a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I put a motion forward to the Planning Advisory Committee approve the change to the start time of the regular PAC meeting from 7 to 6 p.m. and the end time amended from 11 to 10 p.m. starting with the first meeting of 2023 and the PAC policies amended to reflect this change.
Thank you, Mark. Can I have a seconder on that?
I'll second that, Darren. It's Kendall.
Thank you. Can we have a vote, please?
The only question is are we going through the same process as council, a 90-day trial, is this permanent?
It was just put through as a change, wasn't it?
I'm open to that question.
I'm fine with that also.
Yeah, let's do that for not a 3 month trial. Is that fair, Violet? Do that? Or does that cause confusion in the write-up?
I can change the motion to include that it's a 3 month. We'll visit at the end of the 3 months.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm okay with the 3-month trial.
Perfect. Can we all vote in that, please? I don't see the voting coming up anymore. I don't know why, but
It is carried 6-0.
Yeah, thank you. And carried 6-0. So Violet, you guys are gonna have that amended in that the bylaw. Planning Advisory Committee. Yeah, okay. There's no amendment. Does that go in our guidelines from PAC? Is that where that gets amended to?
Yes, it goes in the PAC policy. That'll be amended
Yeah.
and presented to the members at the first meeting.
Perfect. Thank you. Item 8. To have a motion to receive and file.
So move.
I have a seconder on that.
Second.
Can we vote on that, please? I see it now. Voting motion carried unanimously. That being, we'll move on to item 9. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Can I have a seconder on that?
We all would. Brenda, so moved.
Thank you. Motion carried. Meeting's adjourned. So once you shut it down, I'm gone, eh, Christy?